All right, thanks for joining me today, Kevin, on the Linen Uniform and Facility Services podcast. We're recording live here at the TRSA offices in Alexandria, Virginia for the first time. Uh, we have a big win in Texas that we're going to talk about as far as legislation. Before we get into that, can you give a background of how you got started in the industry and just an overview of what you do here at TRSA?
Oh, I'd be great. Happy to, Jason. First of all, congratulations to you. 76 podcasts. You've been here since number one, and here we are doing our first video podcast. Good for you, man. Good for you.
Thank you.
Well, a little bit about me for the people watching that I have not had the opportunity to meet and spend time with. I'm Kevin Schwab. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations here at TRSA, which pretty much means I'm the voice of TRSA when it comes to dealing with policymakers at the federal level, at the state level, sometimes at the city level, both from an elected perspective, so we deal with the senators and the elected House of Representatives, as well as regulators, people at, say, the Department of Labor, the Environmental Protection Agency. And so my job is to represent this great industry in front of all those policymakers that are going to have an impact on how our members do business every day. So that's who I am. I've been with TRSA 14 and 3/4 years. It'll be 15 in October. Seems like it was just yesterday. It's been a great opportunity for me. It's been a great opportunity to get to know the industry, and I've met a lot of good people. So I'm excited about being here. I'm excited for another 15 years, and I'm excited for all the great things we've been able to do for the industry at this point.
We're glad to have you on board and for all that you've done on behalf of the industry. And let's get a little bit more into specifically the legislation in Texas.
Sure.
So what does the passage of Senate Bill 2774 and House Bill 1769 mean for the linen, uniform, and facility services industry in Texas?
Well, there's a couple of different meanings. At the most basic rate, and in what the bills actually do, is they reduce the tax rate that our industry has to pay in Texas. Texas has what's called a franchise tax, and within that tax, there are two rates. There's a wholesale rate and a retail rate. The wholesale rate is 0.75%. The retail rate is 0.375%. Up until this legislation, our industry was paying the wholesale rate of 0.75%. Now that this legislation has been passed, the industry will now start paying a rate of 0.375%, effectively cutting their tax liability through the retail tax in half. So we've done a quick math, and actually, according to the state of Texas, not from the association, but according to the state of Texas, the industry will be saving roughly $3 million annually. And while this is not a scientific formulation, if you look at the number of locations that TRSA has in its database, and that's TRSA members and non-members as well, and you average the 3 million out, we're saving each location anywhere from $22,000 to $23,000 annually. So that's the very basic part of what this legislation does. But there's a bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish, both at the federal level and in other states, that it recognizes our industry as producers and manufacturers more than it does a service industry. And this is the first state to do that, with, we hope, many other states to come. But this is the first state to do it from a legislative perspective. And what that does is that helps us amplify our message when we're working with other states and the federal government to look at us as more of a manufacturing / producing industry than just a service industry. So there's a smaller picture of the immediate tax rate decrease, but there's a larger messaging picture about how the industry is looked at and identified.
So there's greater benefits besides just the economic benefits of the bill.
There are greater benefits besides just the economic, and that doesn't even talk about what our industry can provide for the great state of Texas. I don't know if you know this. I am a Texan, Jason.
I've
Grew
heard,
up in,
may have heard,
I
yes.
grew up in Abilene, Texas. Went to the Angelo State University. Go Rams! I'm sure everybody that's listening knows where Angelo State is. But what it does for Texans is it gives our industry the opportunity to expand their role by being able to hire more people and create more jobs. It's also going to create a bigger opportunity for our industry to help more Texans that are first responders by providing protective equipment, protective clothing for them, and being able to expand the current reach due to the savings. So we're increasing the job base in Texas. We're increasing safety for first responders and other organizations that need PPE.
So TRSA and its members played a major role in advocating for this bill. Several TRSA members testified before committees in Texas. What strategies did you use to successfully influence lawmakers? And then is there anything that you can take away from this approach moving forward?
Oh, definitely. All politics is local, and all politicians want to hear from their members. And this legislative victory is a perfect example of what I like to call shoe leather lobbying. Almost every industry has an association lobbyist, such as me. All industries have somebody like me. And my job is to know the process of how to work to engage policymakers and maneuver policy to where there's either not a bad impact on the industry or how it can benefit the industry. But at the end of the day, policymakers, especially elected policymakers, want to hear from their members or their constituents. Back in March, we held a Texas Legislative Day to help support our legislation. And at that point in time, we only had a House bill. We had Representative Drew Darby from San Angelo, who had introduced 1769 on our behalf. And this is the third time that he's introduced it on our behalf. And the reason he did that is because he knew the UniFirst rep. UniFirst has a location in San Angelo. And Drew knew the UniFirst rep and knew the company. So he introduced the legislation on behalf of a constituent of his. So we had the legislative day where we had 35 TRSA members go to Austin and visit their legislators. And I'd like to give a shout out. I mean, we had a lot of active members. You mentioned the testimony. We had Terry Garcia from Division Laundry. She came to the Texas Legislative Day. She also testified in front of I believe she did the House Ways and Means Committee. And then we had Roger Harris from Metro Linen. He came and testified in front of the Senate committee that was hearing this bill. So they were active in both the legislative day and spending extra time going to Austin to testify. But we had about 17 members of the UniFirst staff come to our legislative day. And they went to Capitol Hill. And like I said, at that point, we only had a House bill that was introduced. And something that was very important to our strategy was to get a Senate bill introduced. So after this day, after the day, we had over 70 meetings with legislators on that day. There were two UniFirst employees that met with a gentleman, State Senator Adam Hinojosa, who's down in the Corpus Christi area. And because of that meeting and because they did a fantastic job explaining the industry and the importance of this initiative, he ended up being our chief sponsor in the state Senate. And if it wasn't for us being able to run a state Senate bill congruent with a House bill, I'm not real sure that we'd be celebrating this victory. But because of that shoe leather lobbying that I mentioned and having members go to Austin and visit with their legislators, that really helped strengthen our position. And I don't want to take away from all the other organizations. We had several different companies come and attend, and every meeting that they had was important. We had one supplier partner. I was proud of the Tingu company had two of their their staff down that help to support our operators. But it's that type of shoe leather lobbying that helped push this past the finish line. So, and that's what we're going to have to do in other things. Policy rarely gets made unless there is a form of grassroots effort. And so, unless there is somebody from a member's district pushing an issue, it very rarely goes to the top. And not only was it Texas Legislative Day, we need to recognize all the work that our industry did, whether they attended the Legislative Day or not, that our industry did contacting their legislators when we had votes coming. There were several legislative alerts that we had sent out where people were in their, we had members in their offices calling their elected representatives and their state senators and their state representatives to get this bill to pass. So it was being boots on the ground in Austin. It was visiting members in Austin. It was making phone calls to members when they're in their office when it was voting. So it was an all-out effort on behalf of the entire industry that was able to get this past the finish line.
Sounds like it was truly a collective effort.
It was, and I was really proud of to be in industry and to be working with the folks that I did. We had a lot of general managers that were in Austin on Hill Day that were a lot of fun to be around, and they're better lobbyists than I ever hoped to be. They were fantastic. It was great.
They help make your job easy, I guess.
They do, and it's a cautionary tale moving forward. If there's other issues that we have working at the federal, like our issue with increasing the amount of reusable healthcare textiles, the one way that we can emphasize the importance of this and help make the path easier of some sort of activity is to have the local members contact their legislators, and it really does. Many hands make for lighter work, and it really does make a difference.
And speaking of the workforce, with more than 20,000 Texans employed in the linen uniform and facility services industry, how might this bill affect job creation, workforce development, and then service expansion across the state?
No, thank you for bringing that. I know I touched on it a little while ago, but having this money freed up on a reduced tax rate is going to allow companies to acquire other locations. I know that there's one specific company that, without this tax break, they were looking at options of expanding and adding a plant, but they weren't sure they're going to be able to. But this break is going to give them the ability to add a whole plant to another place of Texas that doesn't have a plant, and hiring Texans. So it gives needed capital to our industry to be able to expand either their current facilities to be able to increase production, or build new facilities where they can bring in new workers, bring in Texans to new jobs, creating a larger workforce. So having access to that kind of capital is really important, really important.
Do you think that this success in Texas could inspire similar legislative efforts in other states?
I think it does. We are currently involved this year in 2025, we've been involved in 7 states from a legislative perspective. Texas is the first outright victory where we have had legislation passed both chambers and signed by the governor. We have other pieces of legislation that are in other House bodies. And in Wisconsin, we have 2 pieces of legislation that's going to recognize our industry as manufacturers under what Wisconsin calls the Manufacturing and Agriculture Tax Credit. Once other policymakers see that our industry is being looked at as manufacturers or producers, it makes it easier for them to move forward and recognize the industry in the same way. So we're hoping that this momentum from Texas will carry up to Wisconsin from a tax perspective. We're looking at the again, the increase of reusable healthcare textiles and healthcare facilities. We're hoping that other states see the activity that our members in Texas took part of, and it empowers them to want to get out and be motivated to work with their policymakers, so we can help them increase their production, and increase the amount of reusable healthcare textiles, so they can increase production. So we're hoping that Texas is a model that other states will follow from a policymaker perspective, and that other members of other states also can see the benefits of what we're doing.
You just mentioned several other states and even at the federal level that were involved in legislative efforts. Do you see any challenges or opportunities in replicating this model?
There are challenges because not all states have the same political makeup as Texas does. In Wisconsin, we're looking at a divided government. We have a Republican-controlled state assembly, a Republican-controlled state senate, and a Democrat governor who has some philosophical concerns with the tax credit that I discussed a little while ago. So it's a different method of communication, but it doesn't necessarily, because of the victory in Texas, it doesn't pave the way all the way in Wisconsin, but it gives us a model. And in other states, again, in New York, we're working in New York and in California, whereas the political makeup of those two state legislatures, a Democratic majority in both the Assembly and the state Senate, with a Democrat governor, a Democratic administrator. So it's just different messaging, and it's also picking and choosing your battles and knowing how to communicate the initiative to the right people.
In closing, is there anything else that you'd like to share about this Texas legislation with our audience?
Other than this initiative in Texas is a perfect example of why you need to have you need to be more involved in politics if you want to stay in business. There's a saying that says, "Get into politics or get out of business," and so I think this Texas model shows the importance of getting into politics/policy, because without the efforts of our members in Texas, the Texans talking to their state representatives and their state senators, without their efforts, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this goal. So I think I hope that it just empowers TRSA members to get more involved in the legislative and the policy process.
Kevin, thanks again for joining me today, and we look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Well, this is fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity, Jason.